Today we're deconstructing a story about atonement, one that's fought at the very edge of the world. This is Shelter, an anatomy of redemption.
You know, some people run to the ends of the earth, not to find something new, but to bury a life they just can't live anymore. They're looking for a quiet kind of solitude, a shelter built from nothing but silence and distance.
But the past? Well, the past is relentless. It doesn't always stay buried. And sometimes, it doesn't just come knocking on the door. It washes ashore, carried in on the tide of a violent storm.
So our story really begins with a man who's living in a self-imposed exile, a ghost of his own making. His name is Michael Mason.
Mason's history isn't something he's proud of. It's a crushing weight on his shoulders. He wasn't just some elite government assassin. His entire life was defined by a cold, calculated violence that he's now desperate to get away from. So you see, these aren't skills he carries. They're burdens.
And this remote Scottish coast where he's hiding, it's not just a backdrop. You have to see it as a mirror. The harsh, bleak landscape, the relentless waves, they perfectly reflect the emotional fortress that Mason has built around himself. His sanctuary is just as forbidding as his soul.
But of course, no sanctuary is impenetrable. And that brings us to the event that shatters his fragile peace. The inciting incident. It arrives with the storm, forcing the outside world right into his refuge.
A young girl, Jessie, is found stranded near his home. Now, she isn't just a person in need. She represents everything Mason was trying to leave behind: connection, vulnerability, responsibility. She is, in a very real sense, the entire world washing up on his doorstep.
And it's this one single act of humanity that becomes the trigger. Mason's reluctant choice to help her is what puts a ghost back on the grid. It awakens the very life he tried so hard to bury.
And just like that, the hunt begins. His act of compassion draws out the figures from the shadows he used to inhabit. The past doesn't just return, it comes to collect.
Which really poses a critical question for the whole story, doesn't it? How does a man who has completely erased himself suddenly reappear?
Well, the answer is deceptively simple, and it's deeply personal. He returns through the network he abandoned, through the very people who created him in the first place.
The threat here isn't just one enemy, it's an entire system that's now hunting him. First, you have Manafort, his former handler, who represents a deep, personal betrayal. Then there's the agency, that faceless organization he served. And finally, there's Workman, a skilled killer who is, essentially, a dark reflection of what Mason himself used to be.
All of this leads us right into the film's central confrontation, where Mason's isolated, quiet present collides violently with his past. And this brings us to the absolute core theme of the story. For Mason, protection is no longer just a skill set. It's about repurposing his violent abilities for a truly selfless cause. Defending Jessie? It becomes the only real path he has toward redemption. This isn't about survival anymore. It's about atonement. Think about the change. The weapon was just a tool, following orders without emotion. But the protector? He makes a conscious choice. He's no longer just an instrument of the agency. He's now a shield for an innocent life. He finds a new purpose, not in the act of violence itself, but in the reason for it.
So you see, the true stakes of the climax are moral, not physical. The fight itself is almost secondary to the decision Mason makes, to stand and protect, to finally own his actions and define a new purpose for himself.
So let's move into the aftermath. Let's see how that choice shapes the new reality that emerges from all of this conflict.
The resolution here is deliberately nuanced. The immediate danger, Workman, Manafort, that's gone. But the shadow of the agency, the shadow of his history, that still lingers. Redemption doesn't mean erasure.
And this all builds to the film's quiet, symbolic final gesture, a move made not on a battlefield, but on a very different kind of board.
That chess piece he leaves for Jessie is just layered with meaning. On one level, it's a final gift, sure, but it's also a powerful symbol of strategy and foresight. And even more than that, it's a silent promise, a vow that he'll continue to watch over her, to be her guardian from the shadows.
And so, the story leaves us right here. Mason has found a new purpose, a kind of redemption through protection. But that final question, it just hangs in the air, echoing long after the credits roll. Maybe freedom isn't about escaping your past. Maybe it's about choosing what you do with it. And that is a question worth considering.